Hey everybody, welcome back to our webinar series. This is how to succeed at leading in uncertainty and unfortunately right now leading remotely too. If you did not have a remote team a couple of months ago, you probably do now. So we got lots to talk about in this session. This is number 3 in a webinar series. So if you missed the first 2 about selling remotely and how to do a virtual training program for workers who are remote, you can check those out inside of Sandler Online. Just talk to your local Sandler trainer and they'll get you the links for those. You should also get them when you're registered for the webinar and stuff there by email. Today's guest is Antonio Garrido from Miami, Florida. He is a longtime Sandler trainer and he's the author of 2 books. You got him there, Antonio? Asking Questions the Sandler Way, and the new one, The 21st Century Ride Along. And we were talking about it. Either the worst time for a ride-along book or the best time because everybody's got time to read. Antonio, we're going to talk about ride-alongs here later, but you want to really quick introduce yourself and that book since it's brand new?
Sure. Everybody's now thinking, did he say Miami? They're listening to my accent. So yes, Carlos and I, we run the Miami office. That's where we're based. But clearly you can tell from the accent that we're not from Oklahoma. So we've had our office open for about 6 years. Feels like longer sometimes. But yeah, so we have 2 books. Asking Questions the Sandler Way, which I'm hoping somebody at least that's listening has read it and got something nice to say about it. I know it's selling very well. And then the book that came out a couple of weeks ago, The 21st Century Ride Along, which, as you say, is either tremendously good timing or tremendously bad timing. Obviously, I think it's tremendously good timing. Maybe we'll talk about that later today.
We will definitely talk about that, and I think, you know, I've heard other publishers saying that it's they were trying to move up their books because everybody's got time to read and watch their Netflix and study. So it's a great time for that if you have some time to read. Pick up one of those 2 books. But we also want to give you a quick reminder. We've talked about these on the last few webinars, so I'll move through them quickly. But if it's your first time on one of these, Sandler is all about the learning process and getting you to mastery in your sales and leadership skills. So today we're talking about leadership. You're probably not going to become a master ninja sales manager by hearing Antonio and I talk about it for 30 minutes today. So we want you to participate and chime in, but you also have to apply this information, take it out in the real world, practice those skills and master these concepts in your own world. And there's really not a better time to be doing that than right now, really working on your team, on your skills and improving especially your communication, but also your management and leadership skills. Today, we do want you to participate. So if you join in the chat, just type those into the chat in the control panel there, and we will see your answers. If you have any questions, we may have to take those outside of the webinar time today, but we'll do our best to get you a response by email. And if you have any questions, solve those problems. If you have any trouble with audio on today's call, I think only the computer audio is available. So it's probably your bandwidth, because if we can't hear each other, then we'll stop the webinar and fix it. But if you're not hearing it, see if you can do something to close some windows and get more internet bandwidth. And that should solve that problem. And there's a few special offers for you today. If you go to sandler.com/remote selling, sandler.com/remote selling, there are some good offers. We'll talk about those later in the webinar as well. So I wanted to start out with the question, how you doing right now as a leader in selling and managing in a time of unrest and in remotely? What's one thing that you're struggling with right now? Type that in the chat and we'll see if we can adjust some of our talk tracks to hit the issues that are most important to you. Antonio, what are you hearing from your clients you work with around the world, really?
Well, so that's a good question. You know that, you know, we train and coach from the very lowest level right to the very top, right? I know that today's session is about leading. So at that C-suite, what are we hearing? Because we're hearing lots of different issues as you move up the organization. What we're hearing from the leadership teams that we're training and coaching at the moment is, you know, everybody's looking to them for some answers, and oftentimes they don't have that answer at this point, and so they want to say something positive and they're not entirely sure what to say. So it's about super honest and regular communication. I think that's really, really important. The other thing that we're hearing from our leaders especially is that they're losing a sense of community, the kind of connectiveness to their people. You know, a lot of sales guys, so some of our clients have very remote sales forces, right? So they kind of don't see those guys very often anyway, right? They're already remote. Most of my sales teams, most of our clients that have sales teams, all have them somewhere in the world and they're all out and about. So at the sales team level, we're not seeing that quite so much as at the leadership level, where the leaders, especially the good ones, right, like to be very connected to their people and like to see people and walk the floor, right? So we always encourage that kind of stuff. There's no floor to walk, right? There's nobody there. There's just empty buildings and largely, and that upsets them. So we're also seeing that loss of connectiveness. And also, you know, most of our leaders they're kind of decision makers. They like to get things done. They like to act with a certain sense of certainty and so on. And that's kind of a bit scarce right now. So they're dealing with that. Most of our leaders, you know, they had a plan for the year. This wasn't anybody's plan, right? They had a plan. They knew what was going to happen. They even had contingency plans. So maybe some plan B. But this has come out of the sun, really. Most of our leaders, because where are we now? We're in Q2. Are we just about in Q2, right? Around about Q3, towards the end of Q4, everybody put all of their plans in place. They put all of their budgets and CapExes and all of that. And they even had some contingency, the smart ones, but who predicted this? And so plans are up in the air, and most of our leaders, that doesn't sit well with them, right? So uncertainty is really is upsetting people. So you get into the flight, fight, freeze mode, and that's so we're seeing those kind of issues, I think, mainly.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about those kind of things in other webinars, so we'll move quickly through this and get to specifically some management things you can do about those things. But that's what I'm seeing in the chat here too. I see changing business model and processes on the fly, collaboration with your teams, responding to change in the external environment, and especially like your buyers, financial impact, obviously. And then those that I think a lot of other people have hit here is, just as I scroll through, are like dealing with technology, fears, concerns, and stress, working with children in the house, or working from home, and workspace issues, time management stuff.
I'm sorry, Mike, just before you move on, there are, however, and I know the question was, what are they struggling with? But there are, however, also, let's just take a quick second to recognize that in every opportunity, in every crisis perhaps, or in every stress, there are opportunities. So we also have some leaders and some organizations and some businesses that are actually flying right now. So let's not over catastrophize, which is another thing we're telling our leaders not to do. So I know today is about those that are struggling and challenged by this, but it's not everybody. And it may not be some of our clients' customers.
You know, it was really interesting. I just did another webinar with a group, and we did a poll, and 55% said it was pretty much business as usual. And so I think that was staggering. I thought it would at least be the majority of people would say our business has changed dramatically in the last 60 days. But I think we hear about the ones that are, or if we are, it feels like everybody is. And that may or may not necessarily be true. So let's talk really quickly about the Sandler principles here of when we're attacking any problem, we like to look at these three things. What is your attitude? How do you feel about the environment? Are you confident? Are you rocking it? Are you ready to go? Or are you worried, stressed, and concerned? How's your behavior? Are you still doing the same things? Does your plan hold up through this? Were you planning for those contingencies? And are you consistently doing what you need to do, the right thing at the right time? And then finally, how are your skills in this environment? Do you have the questioning skills, the coaching skills, the communication skills, and planning skills to deal with your team in this moment? And all of those things together really create a nice synergy for us to get some things going in the right direction. So let's jump straight to that. And tell me about some of the things, Antonio, that you're hearing that are working. And those of you participants, go ahead and chime in the chat too. What's working for you?
So what we're selling, what we're not selling, what we're telling our clients, and especially that leadership level, what we're really pushing home as hard as we can, a couple of things. First of all, everybody's heard the expression survival of the fittest, right? We all know what that means, and we've all maybe heard of Charles Darwin and Origin of Species and all of that. And when you ask people what does survival of the fittest mean, they kind of tend to think that survival of the fittest means the big 800-pound gorilla is the one that's going to win and all the others are going to fall by the wayside. That's actually not what survival of the fittest says. What Charles Darwin was talking about is those that are more able to adapt to change. That's what he meant by survival of the fittest. So so we're spending a lot of our time with our leaders and our senior managers talking about change. Now, so you talked earlier about coaching, right? So coaching is critical to get people through that change curve, because anybody that goes outside their comfort zone has to get through the change curve. We're all in massive turmoil and change right now. So it's our job to get people to get through that curve faster and flatter, right? Now, coming back to our leaders, that if you go back to the model that you had just a few seconds ago, at Sandler we say, it's not how you feel that determines how you behave, it's how you behave that determines how you feel, right? Another way to talk about that is positive motion. Positive motion leads to positive emotion. And so we're telling our leaders, right? We're encouraging them, this is now a time for marginal gains. Look at how to get better 1% everywhere, every day, how to really focus on that details, keep super busy, keep everybody super busy, and working from home, working remotely with technology like this is a terrific way to connect with people enormously regularly. I think we're going to talk about that a little bit later on as well. So what is working is people they may not be physically connected, but they are actually connecting really well. The best leaders are doing that. They're making sure that everybody is super duper busy, because that does lead to positive emotion, right? Good attitude and so on. So I said to a leader of mine this morning, I said, hey, listen, if you don't come out of this having learned something new, changed maybe some parts of the business, if you haven't come out of this with new skills, new prospects, then your issue was never time. Your issue is motivation. And so because now you have time. So what's one thing that's working? Those that are making the best use of their time, which is different now than it's ever been. Does that make sense?
I think so, and that's a lot of the stuff I'm seeing in the chat. There's some great positive takeaways here. It's a time to discover and leverage your talent on your team, or maybe even find new talent. For a lot of people are going to be available and up for grabs to upgrade the talent on your team. Making time for long-term priorities, the planning and things that you were just mentioning. Greater productivity in certain areas because you have focus and less distractions in some ways around the business priorities. You know extremely what's important here, and some of the things that are not important have gone away or changed. More autonomy and responsibility is great. And then what I see here, and I'll just kind of lump all these together, is a chance to have like a cathartic sort of restart, right? Like sometimes changing a company is a really difficult thing that takes a long time. That we just had a massive innovation and quick change that you could rebuild and change a lot of stuff for the positive very quickly. Right?
Absolutely. One of the things that we've told all of our teams to do, right from the top to all the way down, the whole kind of hierarchy, is things that we've mentioned earlier, don't catastrophize and all of that kind of stuff. But one of the top things we've told people to do as soon as they can, as quickly as they can, is to deal with reality. And I don't mean don't catastrophize. What I mean is we're talking to all of our clients and we're saying, now set yourself a goal that by next Thursday, for example, we will have contacted every single person in our pipeline and found out what's real, found out what still exists, what doesn't exist. Let's deal with reality. We all kind of live in this kind of land where we hope that things are going to be okay. And hope isn't a high growth strategy ever, and now less than ever, right? And so one of the good things, if we're super proactive and organized about our time, so what is working, just as you've said, it's allowed people to do a Control-Alt-Delete, right? If that's what you do to companies, right? Maybe I'm showing my age now. No one knows what that means. And basically, look at your pipeline. Look what is real. Call people up and say, hey, Frank, this project ABC, I had it down in my CRM as 80% closing in the next 3 months. I don't suppose that's still true, right? And dealing with what's real. Another thing that's working very well is now it's much easier actually to connect to prospects more than ever, right? And so because they're at home also, right? And so so go back to I know we're maybe talking about some things that we're going to talk about a little bit later on, but anyone you have ever given a quotation to, just or a proposal to, just send them an email and say, I don't suppose you're still on the market for a new roof, right? Or whatever it is that you do, and just figure out, just build some more relationships. So what's working well, those people that are super organized, this is not nearly as dreadful as people first imagine.
Yeah, I love that. I heard another Sandler trainer this week say, clean your hands and clean your pipeline right now are the two best things you can do. Was that you? Did I steal that from you? I love that. I think that's great. Some other piece here. We're going to talk a lot about these, and these aren't the official ones, but when thinking about your attitude and how you feel right now, are you powered up and ready to slingshot into the second quarter and make some amazing things happen? Or are you still grinding and slowing the momentum down and winding things down based on how you feel about your personal presence, yourself? How are you taking care of your body and your mind and your home office and ready to go? Or are you struggling? Your prospecting for your team, has that ground to a halt, or are they still out there moving and connecting with more people than ever? You just mentioned the pipeline. Your personal performance and your team's performance. What about the results? Are those still moving through, or have those ground to a halt? And then profit potential and cash flow, I think obviously comes into that too. Some managers will have something to do with that, but I'm sure even the owners and other people are pushing sales managers and sales people to get some sort of cash in the door from their people. What are the best way for us to think about these?
Well, I think a few slides ago, we didn't really spend enough time on it. I think the first thing to think about in terms of the attitude piece, right, for leaders, a couple of things. One, this too shall pass. And I know everybody's saying it, and that's kind of becoming a cliche, but it's actually true, and we need to think about it. And somebody described it very nicely to me a little while ago. And it's almost like, we kind of want things to go back to as they were, right? We kind of like, just think, why can't things go back to where they were? And it wasn't that long ago. We're only talking maybe 4 weeks ago. We're not talking 4 years ago, right? But then think about all of those big kind of pinch points or speed bumps, over the years. Things never go back to like they were. So they're not going to this time because they never did then. So they didn't go back to after 9/11. After the Vietnam War, after JFK got shot, after anything, right? Things don't go back to how they were. And so let's first get over that, right? So in terms of our own mindset, our own attitude, and what we're cascading down to our teams, right? Because remember, as a leader, you are leading whether you want to or not. You are communicating whether you want to or not. You are setting an example whether you want to or not, right? And be very mindful, because people will listen to what you say, but they'll watch what you do. And so you've got to be super mindful about your attitude to this whole thing. And when you say this too shall pass, you've got to say it like you actually mean it, right? Because it is actually true, right? And so they are looking to you for that. It's funny how many leaders behave one way at home and another way at the office. And when they're at home and they're telling their family that this too shall pass and things will be okay, they do so out of love and out of a nurturing, it comes from a good place, right?
Right.
Then they get to the office and they tell a different story. And I'd love our leaders to tell the story at work that they're telling their people at home.
Well, I think that's so interesting, and you made me think of what we call our okay, not okay principle, and that might not be something we have time to talk about here, but there's an interesting psychological switch that happens, and I see this as I kind of process things is sometimes when everybody else is freaking out, it makes you freak out. But sometimes when everybody else is freaking out, it centers you and you're like, okay, well, I need to come together as a leader for my team and my family and be a rock here. So even if things are bad and I'm not sure what to do, I get that like centered calm and focus that
Yeah.
really brings out some great things. And I think we can have an opportunity to do that for our businesses right now, which takes us to our next slide, is we can think about the organizational excellence process that we have here at Sandler and how do we put the right things in place now more than ever to be a lean, mean, operational machine here that maybe would have taken us 2 years to change. But now we have an opportunity to think, how do we work remotely? How do we hire responsible people that we can trust to work from home? I've had managers say that to me, Antonio. They were like, well, I don't know if we can trust our people to be productive working from home. And it's like, then you can't trust them to be productive working in the office, right? So that's a different problem than whether working from home is the right thing to do or not, right?
Yeah, I think so. Here's one of the things we've been telling our leaders, and I think this is, of all the things that we can talk about today, I think this is probably maybe the most insightful or helpful or useful. So just consider this at the moment in relation exactly to this 6 Ps, right? It's almost like, this isn't the point, I'm running up to the point, right? But it's almost like now is the time to get a clean piece of paper and do some thinking, right? And do some planning and some strategizing, but to also think about this. Let's play a game. Let's imagine it's 6 months time, and let's hope that we're getting towards the end of this. I don't think it's going to be too much earlier than that. So let's just say 6 months for the sake of a time frame. This is to all of the leaders listening, right? So in 6 months time, we're going to be looking back at today, right, and all the other days that are going to follow over the next 6 months. And how would you like all of the people that work in your organizations to describe your leadership style, your leadership over the last 6 months? And write down maybe 8 or 9 or 10 adjectives to describe or how you would love them to have described your tenure over the last 6 months, right, through this turbulent and difficult time perhaps. And you'd like them to say maybe solutions oriented, you'd like them to maybe say brave, you'd like them to maybe say inclusive and communicative, whatever makes sense to you as a leader, whoever's listening. So in other words, in 6 months time, how would you like everyone in the business to describe your leadership over the last 6 months? Well, that's now your roadmap, that's now your compass, and that's how you have to behave, right? That has to be your attitude for the next 6 months, so that whatever happens, if you've written down that you want everybody to think that you are a steadying hand, for example, then anything that comes to you, that's how you have to behave. So my coach says to me, so what did you do today? And I explain and describe what I do, what I did. And he said, did you do any of that kind of stuff because that's what Antonio naturally does? Or did you do that stuff by design? And I would say, well, that's probably what Antonio would do today. And he said, that's the wrong answer, right? Let's be very intentional about what it is that we're doing. So think about the planning and the positions and the people, and think about all of this in your organization. Project forward 6 months, think, what would you like it to look like then? How would you like to have behaved over the last 6 months? Describe that in some detail. And now from today, from now until then, that's what you have to deliver as a leader.
That's awesome. And I would also say, even sometimes looking back, 60 days ago, think back to January, and I think every single one of these 6 Ps has changed. So yes, they either changed intentionally or unintentionally, but your plan for the year has changed. Your passion for the business probably has changed. The positions in your company where people are already laying people off, switching roles where maybe somebody was in inside sales and now they're in outside sales. Positions have changed, people have changed, processes have changed. Even the measurements, we're not maybe measuring sales anymore, we're measuring the appointments that we can set or the amount of revenue that we keep. All 6 Ps have changed in the last 6 months.
But they all need designing. They all have to intentionally be constructed, not just, is this a time for evolution or revolution? Well, maybe some are going to say revolution, some are going to say evolution. But leadership is about intentionality and design. So the world has changed, so our circumstances have changed. Okay, we get it. in some instances it's terrific, and in some instances it's terrible. I get it, but either of those requires some intentionality by the leader. So plan it, design it, go forward 6 months, see what it looks like, plan it now. Sorry, Mike, go ahead.
No, you nailed it. And I think we've talked about this in the other webinar, so we don't need to hit this one a lot, but we know that your attitudes and your beliefs and your plan are a self-fulfilling prophecy. So
Yeah.
what I wanted to mention really quick here is this is true for your people. What you're believing and what you're putting out there, if you're scared that they're not going to sell anything, that's going to make them scared that they're not going to sell anything. If you have belief and faith in them, and I love, the fear or faith has the same definition. I saw that from another Sandler trainer. It's believing what you think is going to happen will come true or is reality. And so if you believe the fear, you get that back. If you have faith that things will work out, then it's going to happen that way.
Yeah, we talk about this model in both of my books, right? A belief is just, it's not something that's true, it's just something that you hold to be true. And you've learned it. And the best thing about being a human is you can rewrite those beliefs. I think now, and maybe we're going to be talking about techniques a little bit later on for our leaders, now more than ever is the time to journal. Like journal. Now more than ever.
Now, another thing, and we talk about this with the sales group, and we'll talk more specifically for sales people next week with Tim Sanfino. But this week, I wanted to talk about, as a manager, sometimes it's hard to say, oh, I want my people to have a great attitude. What does that look like? And I think at Sandler, we've used this framework for a while, is commitment, desire, outlook, and responsibility are all things that you can control and are all ideal elements of that positive attitude that will be helpful in this time period. You want to talk about these, and any thoughts jump out here for you?
Yeah, so I don't know where I first got it. I grabbed it from somewhere, and I'd love to give somebody credit, and I can't remember what it was, who said it to me first. But we have this principle in Sandler about controlling the controllables, right? And just as you say, there are some things that we can control. And I always liken it to a downhill skier, and I'm not sure why. Somebody said it to me once, and it just made perfect sense. And if you can imagine somebody at the top of the mountain, who's in like the Olympics giant slalom or something, and they're stood in that, that little hut thing, it's probably got a name, where it beeps down and then they have to go. Well, there's lots of things that downhill skier can't control, like a million things. They can't control the weather, the condition of the snow, where they go in the running order of the day, who their competitors are, how much training preparation they've done. They can't control the design of the course, the mountain, the time of the event. There's a million things they can't control, but they can control certain things. They can control their approach, they can control their beliefs, they can control their breathing, their nutrition, their equipment, their preparation, their sleep. They can control lots of things. Now, if we're always telling our leaders, if you can't manage it, you can't control it, right? So you can only manage what you can control, but you can control your commitment. You can control your desire. You can control your drive and ambition. You can control how you're responding to all of this stuff. And as I said earlier, they'll listen to what you say, but they'll watch what you do. So be very careful, right? And so think about the things that you can control. It might be worthwhile, again, with this clean white piece of paper, because you guys have got a responsible for doing a lot of the heavy lifting and the initial kind of pointing. You can control, or rather write down all the things that you can control, and it's more things than you think it is. Now, right, you can't control the virus, and you can't control what the president does, and you can't control what anybody else does, so that's fine. That's just the hill you've got to ski on, but you can control other things. I think that's an important message. Figure out what you can control, and then control them like a lunatic, right? Make sure that you're controlling them very well.
And that's, taking that personal responsibility for controlling those controllables is huge. I also heard Seth Godin say the difference between responding and reacting. And so in the hospitals, if they say you're having a reaction, that's a bad thing. If they say you're responding, that's a good thing. So are you in react mode to this crisis, or are you responding with intentionality? I think those are important. And I was hearing some dings on your end there, Antonio. If you want to close whatever was dinging there, I'll hit the next slide and wrap up attitude for us. Some of the beliefs that you could have in this area are, this crisis allows me and my team to take time to work on my business instead of just in it, to focus on what's truly important for us and our clients, to clean out our pipeline, get to yes and no faster, to get ahead of our competition who is in trouble right now and struggling, to understand the real and immediate pains of our clients, to raise our prices and our margins because a lot of people are in desperate need of our services, and to become a stronger pressure state tested team. All those to me are extremely powerful, and you just have to have that possibility. Is it possible that every statement on this screen is true for you and your company? If you believe that's possible, then you can do something about it, right?
Yeah, and I was on another webinar this morning with Carlos and my business partner, and I don't know whether again this was his or somebody else's. I'm not attributing any of these quotes to anybody. I feel like I'm letting somebody down, but we are in a process of change. So we have to change. Change is now not optional, and so some of this stuff may take change, right? So let's recognize that. And he said that the pain of change weighs ounces, the pain of regret weighs tons. So pain of change weighs ounces, and the pain of regret weighs tons. So kind of get on with it.
Now we're going to move to the behavior bucket. And in behavior, how has your sales team changed as a result of the coronavirus? And how has your management behavior, the actions that you're taking on a daily and weekly basis, how have those changed as a result of COVID-19? Type those in the chats, and I'll ask you here, Antonio, when we think about behavior, I immediately go to our behavioral styles that we have here in DISC and see that like everybody under pressure defaults to their extremes and their personal preferences. So the D's become more decisive and more impatient on people taking action. They see lost opportunities. On the opposite side, steady relators might be slower to adjust to this, and they have longer reaction times, but they're extremely reliable and they'll stick with you and processes longer than other people that are jumping ship or being distracted by shiny objects. Are you seeing any major behavioral changes that you would recommend or not recommend?
Well, first of all, it's a really great point. And if anybody's listening or watching this and hasn't had their team assessed, right, now is the perfect time to do it, right? So contact your local Sendler guy and he'll get that set up online, right? Nobody has to go to a testing center, right? So first of all, I think you have to do it. I'm struggling for the words to say with enough force that it's critical. For me, the thing at this point in time, you're right. It's a bit like, you know, when you remember when you were young and you were at school and you got a dish of water and then you put some pepper on the water, right? And you put some soap on your finger and you broke the surface tension of the water and the pepper scattered to the edges, right? A couple of things to say. First, when I go to the supermarket now, I cough, everybody scatters and I get to the straight away. But that's not why I mentioned that story. The point you made a good point earlier, Mike, that when in times of stress and uncertainty, we kind of go more towards the edge of our map, right, of that DISC map. So a D becomes a higher D, and I becomes a higher I, right? And so again, if you haven't had your people tested, get them tested, and you know what I'm talking about. So let's think about what are their fear triggers. So the dominant, their fear is loss of control. And what are we all feeling right now? A loss of control. So the D's in our business and our clients, right, and our prospects, right, we have to make sure that we're communicating to the D's, to the D styles, recognizing that they're feeling this loss of control and recognizing that we have to give them as much control as possible. Don't take their power away, and we've got to do lots of things. The I's, a little bit like me, right, they're feeling, what's their fear? Their fear is rejection. and social separation and stuff. Well, unfortunately, you know, we were all in a house with the doors welded shut. This is a stressful time for those, right? For those high I's. The S's, they're worried about the team. They're worried about what's happening to the whole makeup and fabric of the team. And the compliant guys, because they never want to make a mistake, and all they want is facts and figures and data. So they fear making a mistake and not having enough data. Guess what there is a shortage of right now? Data and facts and figures. So recognizing how you yourself, right, as an individual, your leadership team, your management team, the individuals in your organization, the prospects and clients that you're talking to, recognizing, because it doesn't affect everybody in exactly the way that it affects. So again, it's about this intentionality, right? So rediscover your employees 100%, and also teach them, train them how to communicate with their clients and prospects using this as a guiding principle.
Yeah, and that's a huge management lesson, right? That we teach all of the time, but it's particularly true in a crisis, is that you have to lead the team, but manage the individuals, that you have to have individual conversations here, that one person's fears are going to be different from another person's fears. And we know when a steady relator is worried about losing their job, they're not going to be productive. They're not going to be doing their best work. So how can we encourage and leverage the strengths of each individual and then minimize those fears and weaknesses? And that takes us to our next one, which I think we can hit pretty quick. I feel like this is basic stuff, but it's one thing that we forget in a crisis sometimes, is that we need specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-bound, enjoyable, and rewarding goals for our people. And all of these got thrown up in the air. The deck got reshuffled. And so sometimes we forget, we think, okay, we need an actionable goal right now, and we need to take some action, and people go out and buy toilet paper, and that's the wrong action for your salespeople. We need them to be prospecting, or we need them to do something else. We need to be really specific, give them measurable actions they can take, and then also make sure they're enjoyable and rewarding activities. Like, don't add more stress to this.
Right. I think you're right, and always remember, leaders, what gets rewarded gets repeated. I think for right now, until until we know more, and who knows when that may be, for right now, we're telling all of our leaders, sure, all of these SMART goals, but I think now is a time to compress the time scale of these things. So, I don't think we can, with any assertiveness or any assuredness, develop goals now for maybe 6 or 9 months ahead, right? Yeah. So most of our goals, the SMART goals, sure, but they're with tighter control and more oversight, perhaps shorter intervals of control. So we're saying to our people, I think for us right now, we're saying make sure you're measuring it really well. So that's the measurable piece. And then, so how are we going to track it? What are the early milestones to basically say, are we on the right track or are we not? So now is a time for lots of course correction, because we're in an uncertain world, right? With lots of when you go to Top Gun, right, not the film, the place to learn how to fly a jet, right? They talk about the world being full of VUCA, right? When you're in the cockpit of an aeroplane, the world is volatile, right? Because you don't know what quite it's going to do when you're in a dogfight, right? It's uncertain, it's chaotic and changeable and ambiguous. Well, that's what we've got on right now. And so what they say to the pilots is, don't think 3 minutes in advance, just think 3 seconds in advance. Just think 3 seconds, the next 3 seconds, next 3 seconds. And I think maybe with our world filled with volatility, ambiguity, uncertainty, change, and all that kind of stuff, make sure you're developing those SMART goals with very short interval controls, high measurement, high course correction activity.
You know what? I shouted out Tiger King on the first webinar. This time my quote is from Frozen 2. Do the next right thing, was what they said in that movie. And I love that, because with our attitude and our outlook, we probably need to look further out. We're in crisis right now, but if we look further out with our attitude, we see optimism and we see opportunity in a longer time frame. With behaviors, we need to bring that back to immediate. How can I do the next right thing right now and let the future play out? As long as I'm making and controlling what's in my controllables right now, I'm doing the right thing in behavior. So let's talk about what some of those are for managers here.
So I think that I can see here you have things like Monday morning check-in, MMCI, and Friday afternoon checkout, FACO, right? All those kind of pipeline meetings and so on. What we're trying to say to our leaders and managers, we're trying to say, look, here's a template, right, to maybe start thinking about how you're going to manage your day and communicate, and you have to communicate. Do you think now's the time, leaders, to communicate more or less? What are you thinking? So now's the time to communicate more, and we're kind of putting a template together because people do like that. At Sandler, we talk all about Cookbook for Success, which is kind of like your daily behaviors, like what does your playbook look like? So we want kind of daily huddles, and we don't just want one daily huddle. We kind of like do a group check-in in the morning, right? So we used to do Monday morning check-in and Friday afternoon check-out. Maybe that worked, but now I think we need a group check-in in the morning, and ideally Zoom or Skype, or I don't want to promote any particular platform, right? But where you can see a face, like we're talking now. So some kind of group check-in. Just make sure that everybody's feeling part of a team, and describe what it is that everybody's working today, and set goals for the day, right? So we're going to set some morning goals. I think then, obviously I'm going to say this, that pick some meetings to ride along, right? Whether it's a sales guy or a sales manager, whether you're talking to a prospect or a client. So Zoom's check-ins, set morning goals, do lots. A client of ours, listen to this, a client of ours about 3 weeks, maybe not even 3 weeks ago, sent a note out to all of their teams, and basically there's a travel ban, and everybody knows that, and we all know that that is now the new normal, right? He sent a note out to all of his teams, and he says, hey guys, the time when you were driving to the airport, waiting for the plane, on the plane, getting a hire car, driving to the customer, and then all of that in reverse, maybe 2 days later, all of that unproductive time is now available to us. So in that time, I want you role playing, because if there are going to be fewer opportunities to us, and he didn't say that they were, but he said if there are, then that leaves us less opportunities to make mistakes. So let's be stronger and better. And the first time we try and move isn't at the Super Bowl, right? It's on the practice field again and again and again and again. So now it's time for the leaders to role play, pressure test, to get everybody fighting fit, because the opportunities may be fewer, right? So group check-ins after lunch, one-to-ones, and listen, leaders, I want you to do. I want you to personally write thank you notes, and I want you to do Zoom calls with your people after the end of every day and thank them for their efforts for the day.
Amazing. I mean, there's a whole bunch of good stuff on here that you should be doing anyway, but now more than ever, and now's the time to set a new cadence, because everybody's schedule just changed. There's an opportunity to set a new pattern and anchor new habits.
Right.
I love that. Monday and Friday, company-wide issues, company-wide meetings, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, departmental specific team deliverables, and having those morning check-ins and afternoon check-outs, especially the personal development ones and those personal one-on-one check-ins. I think you never know what happens. So we've had the coronavirus affect Sandler already across our network, in really unfortunate ways, where yesterday business might have been fine, today their spouse is in the hospital on a respirator. That's a big deal. We don't want to miss those kind of things because we didn't check in, or add stress to somebody's day because they have to take time away from that to tell us what's going on. Like, be in constant communication and do those right behaviors, which we should be doing anyway. And so I think here are some interesting thoughts on behavior. Go ahead.
No, I think it's a great attitude to have. Let's assume that our competitors are goofing off. Let's just assume that they're all binge watching Tiger King via Netflix or whatever it is. I was talking to another chap yesterday. It's a little bit like, do you remember when you played Monopoly as a child?
Mm-hmm.
Played Monopoly as a child with whoever, your best friend, or a family member or whatever, and then something happened. So you're happily playing Monopoly. Maybe you're doing well. Maybe you got a stack of cash and you got all the properties and you're doing really well. A couple of get out of jail free cards tucked away, and you're enjoying the game, and your mom tells you you've got to stop playing the game. What you've got three choices, and I think that's what's happened right now, right? Where our mums told us we've got to stop playing the game that we used to play. We either got three choices. Some people, so which means some of your competitors, have thrown the board in the air in a in a fit of temper and gone, well, I don't like the new rules of the new game, and if we can't play, and I'm just petulance and just like throwing all the rules out the window. Some people have said, okay, well then let's stop. Let's stop the game. Let's count the money. Let's make sure everybody knows what everybody owns, right? And then when we're allowed to come back to the game, we will then continue the game, right? So maybe the next day you continue. And some people are looking at this virus like that. They're kind of saying, okay, well, let's stop and then let's wait to see what's going to happen. And I don't think either of those two options are good options, right? The third option is the competitor goes and you keep rolling the dice, right? Keep doing that, who's going to win the game? You're going to win the game pretty quick, right? So the attitude to have is, my competitors are probably binge watching Netflix and are goofing off, right? So let's come out of this. Let's build audience now. Let's get our prospects. Let's clean our pipeline. This allows our team to do new and different things. Maybe I'll get our R&D team doing new and different things and thinking outside the box. This is a great time for entrepreneurs. This is a great time to change career, perhaps. Maybe there are people now in the market, as you said earlier. So if you are imaginative about it, you can sit down with a piece of paper. I keep saying that to our leaders, right? And plan. This crisis allows us to what? But what you must not do is throw the board up in the air and go home and hide under a duvet. What you must not do is freeze. What you must do is figure out how do we, every crisis, and I don't want to call it that, but every situation presents opportunities for those that are determined enough to look for them. And I think that's that is something that we should all pay attention to.
That's great. I think we're down to like our last 10 minutes or so. So we're going to get moving, but there's one more on the screen that we haven't hit. So I think everybody's read it by now. But number 3 is practice gratitude. And I know you love that in your journal, which is also another great behavior. So I'm going to hit 2 other rules here. You can't manage anything you can't control. So don't try and fix politics, the market, the virus, healthcare, anything else. Fix what you can fix. And never manage your results, manage your behavior. So we can't control, what our customers and prospects are doing and how they're spending their money. What we can control is if we're doing the right things and behaviors on our sales team. But Antonio, I want to give you a chance to talk about gratitude in the journal there for 1 second as people type in, what are some skills they think are important today?
Well, in terms of that, in terms of the journaling thing, right? So we all naturally, normally, because we're all human beings, we have 40 to 50,000 thoughts a day, and typically 70 or 80% of them are negative anyway. Last week, 98% of Google searches contained 2 words, corona and virus, right? 98% of searches, people are, how can you have a positive life if it's filled with negativity? I mean, you just can't. Having a mindset of gratitude and possibility and having, allowing yourself to say, this is now a time to learn, to be stronger, to get better, to do all of those role plays, to, you can either think to yourself, oh, we can't travel, how dreadful. Or we can say, great, this is an opportunity now to get stronger and better and faster. So think about, I think we're all, by the end of this, somebody's going to be touched in a very personal way by this virus, perhaps. And so how we approach the world is going to be going to be critical. And it's time to hug our loved ones and think about. I'm looking right. I don't want to grab the computer, but I'm looking outside now at a blue sky and a beautiful lake and birds, and take the time to recognize what you do have, because things could be worse.
That's well said. Now, we've talked a lot about skills in previous webinars as well, and we'll do that in our next one for salespeople. But obvious things, questioning skills is right up your alley. I think time management skills and the priorities is huge, and upfront contracts, making sure that you're getting mutual agreement and great communication are things that I'm seeing in the chat here. So as we move to talk about technique, obviously, there are some video skills, and you can learn how to use Zoom, Skype, or GoToMeeting or whatever you want. to do that. And I was going to give one tip here. You know, the guy on the screen, the guy in the laptop looks great. The guy holding it is shooting right up his nose. So get the camera at eye level, get the light in front of you, figure out how to do the communication, but you can figure out the technical skills. I think there are some other Sandler skills that we can help them with a lot more. And that leads us to these virtual ride-alongs.
Yeah, just coming back to that image, because I couldn't resist it either. No one's taking any notes, which upsets me, right? No, because in a real meeting, in a real face-to-face meeting, you'd have your notebook and your pen, you'd have your pre-call plan, you'd have all of this stuff, you'd have all your questions laid out, and that's not happening here. It makes me feel slightly unwell. Okay.
I will say that's one great technique though of virtual meetings is in a live face-to-face, you can't have your Sandler pain funnel in front of you and your upfront contract builder. You can put all your notes and sticky notes on your monitor here and say, oh, I wanted to ask him about that and I wanted to do that. And you can have all your research and everything right in front of you and they can't see it at all. It's great.
You know, I just come back to what I was saying earlier that, you know, if opportunities are going to be fewer, and there are those that opportunities are now more abundant than ever, then you have to treat each one with even more care and attention than you normally would. So there should be a pre-call plan to every single meeting. If there isn't a pre-call plan or a game plan, as is discussed in this rather splendid book, then I think you should be fired. I mean, I know that sounds, I think that's a really important message, right? Virtual ride-alongs now managers can do more ride-alongs than they ever could, because you don't have to get on the aeroplane and go out into the world and sit right and drive around. Your sales people, your managers, anybody, even customer service teams, right? If they're meeting with other people, you as the leader or the sales manager or the manager, you should be doing ride-alongs. You should be very intentional about. It's a little like. Who won the Super Bowl? I was there. Kansas, right? Yeah, that's what you're. Yeah, right. So isn't it interesting how the head coach, right, the leader of the football team, Kansas or whoever, right? They not only go to every single training session, the head coach goes to every single training session and watches every single game, and between, you know, all the breaks and stuff, coaches them. Why don't all of our leaders do it? Now is the perfect time to be very intentional about upskilling your people. When you said earlier, Mike, it's all about behaviors, attitudes, and techniques. Think about that as a lens and think, if somebody's behaviors aren't quite what they need to be, you as the leader, you need to help manage people's behaviors. If their attitudes aren't quite right, you coach their attitudes. And if the techniques aren't quite right, you train the skill. And how do you find out whether they need more help in their behaviors, more help in their attitudes, more help in their, you either wait at the end of the month and just read it in a monthly report, which tells you what, it's like reading, that's like the coach of Kansas, right? Reading what's in the sports pages. That's nothing like what really happened, right? What you are as a coach worried about. So now is the time to use ride-alongs to figure out in real time exactly what's going on. You've never had more time than you have now to do this. You've never had the technology embedded, perhaps, like you do now to do this. So tell your people, set part of your goals and everybody else's goals, and the behavior that you want everybody to emulate is let's get very collaborative, right? Let's not just cooperate with people, let's collaborate. Let's get involved with lots of meetings virtually where you're observing and you're coaching in real time.
I think that's huge. There's some other things on the screen there for sure. Doing a virtual, it's not very hard to time block, like it says on the screen, a couple of hours a day maybe, and just say, hey, sales team, fill these up with virtual meetings. Invite me on the calendar, invites to any of the sales calls you have between 10 and noon Eastern every day of the week, and I'll accept all the ones that I can and do virtual ride-alongs there. Also, it's really important when working from home to work on goal time and not clock time. It really doesn't matter whether you're making the call at 9 a.m. or 5 p.m. or whatever. We all know we have some family things. You might have to be homeschooling kids or taking care of other priorities. We've gotten a ton of time back for most people, like you mentioned, on the commute and other things. So as long as you're hitting your numbers and doing your behavior, it doesn't matter what the time on the clock says, because we don't have to hustle home and beat rush hour, right?
Just a surgeon health warning, I thought it might be worthwhile mentioning for those that haven't yet read the book. Just beware, leaders, that you don't give the message, hey, invite me into every call and I'll fix everybody's problems, because that's not what I'm talking about. Just making sure. It's talked about in the book where people think, oh, terrific, the big boss man's coming to this meeting, he'll fix all of my problems. That's not what it's about. And you know, the coach of whoever the coach of Kansas is doesn't jump on the field and grab the ball off the quarterback and start throwing it for him, right? I'm just saying.
Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, my friend. You gotta know these things.
Okay.
Future Hall of Famers, both of them. If it was soccer, I'm sure you would have more input, right?
Yeah.
So you talked about collecting best practices, and that is one of our last tips here. We got one more, but creating a sales playbook, collecting these best practices from our team and standardizing them. If you have a Hail Mary pass, if you have this magic football play that gets a touchdown every single time you run it, then make sure everybody knows that play, right? Don't just hide that one and keep it in the pocket.
Right, right. And I would also make sure that when you're thinking about the playbook, either the sales playbook, customer service playbook, the manager's playbook, the leader's playbook, whilst ever you're thinking about these, I think it's really important to be very intentional about what it is that we're trying to achieve. Now you're going to say, well, it's about selling and growing and all of that stuff. But we have a model which we call the CARE model, right? So be very intentional about what things are we doing to keep our critical clients. So there's some keep activity, and then there's some attain activity, stuff that we're going to, you know, grab and guerrilla, go and plunder somebody else's accounts, right? Because the market isn't maybe getting any bigger right now. And if the market isn't getting any bigger for you, then it's your job to go and get share from somebody else, right? So it's a market share grab. Remember, your biggest clients are somebody else's biggest prospects, and maybe they're getting some attention from the ones that aren't binge watching Tiger King. And then some of our regain activity. Go back to all of a client of ours. They are having their best year ever. They've beaten their annual target by the end of March, because as soon as this started to happen, they contacted all of those prospects that told them, yeah, you've got to get down to this price because we're buying all of this stuff from China right now. This isn't a China thing, right? This is right. And so if you can't meet this price, then, you know, we can't help. Well, that supply chain is looking very, very shaky right now. And all they did was they put it in their playbook that they're going to contact everyone that's ever told them that story and say, are you guys still open? We're still open. How's your supply chain looking right now? And one of our clients was given an order for 40 million units of something. They're now working 24/7 because of that one call, because of that one conversation. So think about being very proactive. You know, every situation gives an opportunity.
I think, and you nailed it, that definitely the opportunity ones too. Also the objection handling on this list. I think now is the time, like you said, to role play and figure out answers. If you're hearing objections like the thing's closed, we're busy, blah, 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 we don't have cash, figure out your answers to whatever those biggest objections are and make sure you get those answers out to your team so in the way that they can respond. This is our last one here. So over communicate everything, post sell everything, which means confirm your agreements, make sure everybody's on the same page and still on the same page the next day. You can do some really cool things as a leader and as a salesperson right now. As a leader, build social capital by giving and listening to your team, build relationships by staying connected with them, build your authority and reputation as a leader by bringing value and being a servant leader to them in this moment, and then build intimacy by being open, being personal, asking about their personal situations, taking a second to acknowledge what they have going on in their world. I found it to be really fun in these times. My boss yesterday was doing April Fool's Day on Zoom calls, dressing up with different hats and costumes. Nice. Each time we got on a different call, and just seeing other people's family and spouses and animals barking in the background. There's a chance to really be intimate and learn a lot about your team and the personal situations right now. So think about your takeaways. One attitude, behavior, and technique that you would like to implement immediately. Write those things down right now on the webinar. One attitude you'd like to have about the uncertainty right now. One behavior you will start doing or stop doing. One technique that you can use, one Sandler technique or tip that you heard here today that you can start using. And I wanted to share our full success triangles with everybody because we just scratched the surface on what Sandler actually does for you and your team in developing a plan. And you saw a few frameworks that we talked about today that we can go into much more detail with you if you contact a local Sandler trainer. So to do that, go to sandler.com/remote selling. You can connect with the trainer, ask about any of these topics that we've talked about here today. You can also get a special deal on our online micro-learning collection, bunch of sales skills that you can get in the hands of your people for a special price, and it's digital. You can learn on any device, anywhere, anytime, including the audio in our new My Sandler app. So there's an app in the iTunes and Apple Store, or you can just ask Alexa to enable My Sandler. Great learning for your people and for yourself. There's sales and leadership audio in the brand new My Sandler app. So we're happy to debut and launch that now too. I think it was great timing to get an electronic mobile learning and mobile coaching for your salespeople inside the apps. So just go to the App Store, search for My Sandler. Thank you for being here. Antonio, any final thoughts?
Yeah, as a leader, I want you to think, look at your business right now, what's broken. Look at your business right now, what's missing. Look at your business right now, who's confused. Fix those three things.
Love it. Again, thank you for sticking all the way till the end. Check out those resources. It's our way of giving back and trying to help you there. A lot of free resources, including that brand new app, My Sandler. And don't forget Antonio's book, Asking Questions, but especially for leaders, check out the 21st Century Ride Along. It's available at Amazon on the Kindle version. So go check that out. Wash your hands, clean your hands, clean your pipeline.
Yes.
We'll see you next week for the last one in this series.
Bye, everybody.